Well, springtime means flooding for many parts of Canada, and with climate change, those floods are getting worse. Today, the University of Waterloo's Intact Centre on Climate Adaptation released a free tool to help plan for those potential disasters. The Municipal Flood Risk Check-Up tool will show municipal authorities where to avoid real estate development. Blair Feltmate is the head of the Intact Centre for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. We reached him in Oakville, Ontario.
Hello.
To start off with, who is this tool for? Are we looking at individual homeowners, municipalities, governments?
The tool's primarily for municipalities that need a simple and non-costly method to assess their vulnerability to flooding. And that includes flooding due to rivers overflowing or water traveling into basements through sewer systems that back up during big storms, or homes in coastal regions along the ocean or Great Lakes that might be exposed to shoreline flooding. But basically, it's a tool for municipalities.
And how does it actually work?
The tool walks a community officer or whoever's responsible to assess flood risk in a community through a series of about 50 questions to identify the potential types of flooding a community might be subject to, such as rivers overflowing or sewers backing up, and then the subsequent actions to be taken to lower those risks. So, for example, a question might be, in slightly simplified form, has your community analyzed climate change projections for different types of flood risk? And the answer could be that the community has done so fully, somewhat, or not at all, or they sort of have a high, medium, or low score. And by the time you put a community through 50 questions like this, you can get a pretty good profile for the community or paint the picture as to what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the areas to be improved upon to limit flood risk.
And how does this differ from what municipalities might already know?
Well, right now, they really don't. Most municipalities don't have access to a user-friendly, non-costly tool. And it's not that they don't have the desire to do the assessment, but to date, they really have not had a tool like this that's fairly well informed. About 50 people were involved in developing it over 2 years. And this is almost anybody can execute with this tool.
And we've seen this time and time again. So many communities in our own listening area have been hit hard by floods over the years. Talk to us a little. Can you explain more the cost to communities for limiting flood risk, like spending that money on the front end as opposed to dealing with the disaster on the other end once the flood has happened?
Yeah, so there can be money, necessary to spend upfront to prepare for floods. However, through a multitude of studies, internationally and nationally, it almost universally works out that for $1 invested in preparedness for flooding to avoid the flood, you save about $3 to $8 in avoided losses and damage that now doesn't occur over a 10-year period. So the ratio of return on investment is $1 in produces $3 to $8 in savings, or money that you didn't have to pay out per 10-year period, which is a pretty good return.
And we hear the same thing when it comes to fire risk mitigation and management, and yet the money still often isn't there. Is a tool like this maybe something that might help municipalities make a case for spending more money on mitigation before the floods happen?
Yes, absolutely. Because quite frankly, across Canada now, we've even got growth in communities where houses within communities that they can no longer, for example, get insurance for flooding because the risk is so high, the amount the insurers would have to charge is off the charts and nobody could afford it. So by ignoring the problem, that simply can't be the place we're at. We've got to deal with this stuff proactively.
And tell me a little bit more about the genesis of this tool. Like, why did you even want to develop this in the first place?
Because before this tool was available, there was sort of a precursor to it, but it was a very complex engineering tool that would be virtually cost prohibitive to 95% of communities in the country to even begin to use. So there was nothing that for someone in a community somewhere who might be able to work on flood risk off the side of their desk half a day a week, and that they're not a hydraulics engineer or something. They didn't really have something that they could use. This is very user-friendly that within probably 2 or 3 hours, and then getting on the phone and talking to the appropriate people in the community, someone can get a very good picture of their flood risk quickly without great technical expertise being required.
And does it have the availability to look at like specific different areas within a community?
Yes, you can break the community down by location. The short answer is yes.
And where the money come? I mean, you say this is expensive work to do on the other for municipalities on their own. Where did the money come from to develop this tool?
To a large extent from Intact Financial, which is it is the largest property casualty insurance company in Canada, and they funded the genesis of this tool.
And why would it behoove them to have this information?
Well, for insurers, quite frankly, they would like to see, one of the best things they would like to see is not have these extreme weather events causing great costs to insurers, so they would benefit. Homeowners would benefit, municipalities would benefit. Literally everybody benefits by not having the problem or limiting the problem as much as possible.
How often are we seeing communities, you kind of alluded to it earlier, where building is just no longer even allowed in certain areas? Do you think that we might be seeing more of that?
The answer is yes. However, it doesn't mean that just because an area is prone to flooding that you can't build there. But it does mean you build there with your eyes open. So you may build into the community flood protection measures. You may use berms, diversion channels, holding ponds, cisterns, bioswales, structures that can direct water to safe locations and keep people and property out of harm's way. You can still build there if you have to, but make sure you put the right measures in place so that the people that are in this new community, they don't end up being all flooded out.
I really appreciate you walking us through this. Thank you very much, Blair.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
That is Blair Feltmate, the head of the Intact Centre for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. We reach Blair in Oakville, Ontario. To use the tool, you can visit the Intact Centre's website. It's at www.intactclimatecenterclimateadaptation.ca. That's Intact Climate Centre climateadaptation.ca.